Welcome back to Small College Conversations. I'm Jim Abbott. I'm the founder of the business of Small College Athletics. Today, I'm joined by Jen Flowers, the athletic director at Southwest Minnesota State University. Jen, thanks so much for being here today.
How you doing, Jim? Thanks so much for having me.
Well, you bet. I'm thrilled to have you. I love looking into the background of athletic administrators. And so where I'm going to start with you, which will give you an opportunity to kind of tell us how you got where you are. But I looked at your bio, and your bio told me that you have a degree in elementary education with an emphasis on middle school mathematics.
Sure
So
do.
how the heck did you end up as an athletic director?
I think teaching was sort of always going to be my backup plan, if that makes sense. I grew up in a family around sports. My dad was a high school athletic director, a college football coach, a high school football coach, all the things. My brother still coaches college football right now. It's just kind of what I knew was being around sports. And I thought in some capacity, that's probably what I was going to do as well. I mean, candidly, probably thought I was going to teach and coach. I'm from a small town in Iowa and kind of imagined that maybe that's where I was going to land. But felt like I was going to have to probably get a master's degree. And so I wanted my background to be in a place where I was most comfortable and that could be a landing spot if something different didn't come along. And so I have an elementary education degree, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. I think you learn a lot. Teachers are amazing. Shout out to all the teachers, but I think you learn a lot about how to interact with people, whether they're 6 and 7 years old or older. And the middle school math thing, math was my favorite subject. And my advisor in college said, you better have an emphasis. So I picked that one. To this point, I haven't had to use that degree, but who's to say that I won't at some point? I do keep my teaching certification up just in case. You just never really know. So I'm proud of that background, but certainly I think always maybe envisioned or hoped that I would be doing something different than that in sports. But I just at the time wasn't sure there was a place for me in that industry and wasn't really sure what that path was going to look like. So wanted to ensure that I had an education degree that would serve me my whole life.
Well, and if your circumstances are like mine, that math degree comes in handy every year when you do the budgeting process, right?
Yeah, for sure. It's a good thing that I can add and subtract.
And it's so funny. I immediately, when you talked about working with 6 and 7 year olds, my mind leapt to the idea that sometimes working with coaches can be kind of similar, right?
I will not tell my coaches that you said that. I don't think I've used, I might think that some days, Jim, don't get me wrong, but certainly you have to learn how to work with people, right? And that's part of the business that we're in. And some of them will challenge you in different ways, just like a first grader will some days.
Well, it's a big part of it. There's no doubt. So, okay. When I think about your background, that was the first question. And then I look at the things that you've done. You've worked in a conference office. You've actually been a conference commissioner. So talk about what that was like, and then what ultimately led you back to campus.
My path is really interesting. And I think when I talk about it, it kind of reminds me of how lucky I've been, candidly. So I had a chance to go back to my alma mater, my first kind of dive into administration. I started out as a assistant volleyball, assistant basketball coach, and recruiting coordinator at Simpson College. That was my first real job after I had gotten my master's degree. And I loved that. And at that age, that was a really good fit for me. I learned a lot. And then there was an opportunity to go back to Winona State, which is where I got my undergraduate degree, where I was a student athlete as well. And that position was an associate AD, senior women administrator. And I was really lucky to get hired into that role as a pretty young lady. And so I really dove into that and tried to soak up just as much as I could. I was fortunate. My boss at the time, Larry Holstead, really just gave me the keys, let me get involved in whatever. He showed me everything he could. It was a different time in Division II, candidly. I think it was kind of before Division II has grown into what it is now. Our staff was much smaller at the time. And so we were, when you talk about wearing a lot of hats, we all wore a lot of hats at that time. And I was really proud to have all of those opportunities and to kind of try to figure out where it is that I wanted to land. And in the meantime, in the middle of all of that, my social life changed too. And I got married, and I had a husband who was playing professional basketball overseas, and his journey kind of then coincided with my journey, which sort of led to some of the decisions that I made, candidly. And so I had a chance to go work at the Northern Sun Conference office for Commissioner Aaron Lind, who's been a friend of mine since I was 18. When I did kind of 2 stints at Winona in a couple of different ways, both in the same role, then had a chance to go to the Northern Sun, and then had an opportunity to really step outside of my comfort level and become a commissioner of the WCHA, which is the best Division I women's hockey conference in the country. I mentioned I'm from Iowa. I don't know a whole lot about hockey. At the time, the cool thing about the WCHA then and now is that 4 of the schools that compete in that league also compete in the Northern Sun. They're Division II institutions with Division I hockey: Duluth, Bemidji, St. Cloud, and Mankato. And so I had some colleagues who said, "Hey, give it a shot. I think you'd be great. I think you could help us," those kinds of things. So I did it. So that was my first kind of step into true leadership, where I was the one making the decisions, which was something that I think I was ready for, probably why I went for it. And that was probably a career defining decision for me in some regards, because it really allowed me to be me in this space and really have a chance to lead and to show people that I was fully capable of leading. I was 4 or 5 months in, and COVID hit, which, as everyone knows, there was no playbook for, and we had to navigate a lot of things. And at that time, for those who don't understand the WCHA, I was dealing with the dynamics of The Ohio State University and Bemidji State University. And so you can just imagine, we were all over the place, and the fear of maybe never getting that league back on the ice was very real for a few months. And again, I think going through all of that, when I say career defining, I think that's why, because I'm proud to say we made it. We survived. We were the first league to get back to competition. And it was a really cool thing. And I learned a lot about how to lead and how to kind of trust myself at different times and lean on different people. The conference office space is very different. I say that to my colleagues all the time, that sometimes being able to put on a hat that's different and see it through a different lens makes you better. And I feel that way for myself, for sure. I've been able to work in a variety of different spaces, and all of that helps me now. I knew, Jim, that I wanted to be back on campus. I love being around our student athletes, and I think I have a mission and a goal to really make a place better. And that was what I felt was the opportunity here at Southwest when this job came open. And I hope I'm doing that. We'll see. Time will tell. I've been here for a little over 2 years. It started my 3rd year now, 3rd fall. So I want to make an impact. I want to create a space where student athletes have an experience that they're proud of. And that was ultimately what led me back to campus, was maybe to be able to have a little more true impact in that space.
Yeah, that's interesting. I talk to so many people who will start a sentence with "got started" and then COVID, and it's I thinking about the league that you were running at that point, and I think what you were trying to describe was a massively large university with virtually unlimited resources versus people like you and me. And here we are, we're trying to figure out daily symptom checks and COVID tests and wearing a mask at practice. I mean, I remember all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So kudos to you, because a lot of that, I think, is not just leading and making decisions, but building consensus, right?
Yeah, for sure. Had it not been, quite honestly, Josh Burlow, who was the AD at the University of Minnesota Duluth at that time, and Duluth sometimes served as our middleman institution a little bit. It's probably a bad way to describe it, but the protocols that our Big Ten, that our WCHA members who were Big Ten members, what they were having to deal with, and what our WCHA members who were NSIC members were having to deal with, it was just so different. And we really needed one institution to kind of bridge that gap for us a little bit. And Josh and UMD were able to do that. And you just learn a lot about people through that time. I mean, there was a couple of times where, I'd call my colleagues and say, I am not a doctor. I am not a scientist. Everybody had all these questions that no one knew where to get answers from. And so some of it for sure was just like providing a space where we could all kind of have an outlet to talk through it and learn together. And that's really what we did. And just, when you're working in the conference office setting, your job is very different. You are building consensus. You are trying to get people on the same page and to see whatever vision truly that they want, you're trying to bring to life and show them how you can do those kinds of things. And the leadership on campus of all those schools was so awesome. And certainly some really hard meetings and some hard conversations, but ultimately we got through it. And I, hopefully, knock on something, we're not doing that again, because wasn't very fun.
Yeah, I imagine. I mean, I don't know if we face another pandemic, we will have learned a few things, I think. But it's so funny to hear you talk about it, because there were schools that we competed with that they're almost like, what pandemic?
Mm-hmm.
We're fine here. Nobody wears a mask, and so anyway, I think the final part of that from a conference office that people don't appreciate is when you talk about building consensus, well, there may not even be campus consensus. The AD and the president have this opinion and the coach has this opinion. And so we say that word so easily. I just want to point out to people listening or watching this that heck, it's not even easy to get people on the same campus to agree sometimes.
Yeah, that you are right on there. And thankfully, I think at least in our league in the Northern Sun right now, I mean, Erin and her staff do a tremendous job, and we have, I think, it's what we know, but we feel like we have kind of the right platforms for coaches to provide their feedback, administrators to meet about it, board of directors, folks to chime in when they need to. And we've built a pretty cohesive unit, but no one ever agrees. Consensus is not a real word. I feel like, to have something unanimous is not. It's just, especially in a league of 15 going to be 16, we're not going to be unanimous on very many things. It's just the way that it is. So understanding to, be respectful of each other's opinions and really try at the end of the day to do what's right by the student athletes. And that's the challenge sometimes, is really like oftentimes, and I think I'm fortunate with, given my past, I've been able to wear a lot of different hats. So I can take my SMSU hat off sometimes and put my NSIC hat on and say, is this the right thing for the league? Might not be the right thing for me or my school or my coach or my student athletes in my own mind right now. But big picture, do I think it's going to be the right thing? And will we be able to get around it? And that's not as easy as it sounds, certainly. Competitive people make things challenging sometimes.
It does. And it requires a level of maturity that is beyond most of us most of the time.
Correct.
Okay, so tell me, what does an average day look like for the athletic director at Southwest Minnesota State? What are your priorities? What does it look like?
People have asked me shortly after I got started, is this everything that you thought it would be? Obviously, it's my first time as an AD. And I never know how to answer that question, because I don't have an average day. Every day, I'm just looking at my calendar. Every day is a little bit different, which is part of the reason we all love this, I think. But the one thing that I maybe didn't appreciate or didn't fully understand was the amount of meetings that I would have. And some of those being, cabinet level meetings or university type meetings that are super important that I'm a part of, and then I'm there, but, fill up your calendar relatively quickly. And so I try really hard to make sure that I have at least 2 hours in my day, not necessarily consecutively or whatever, but 2 hours where I can be in my office door open so that people can find me if they need me. And my coaches know, my staff know, if I'm here and my door is open, my door is open. You can come in, you can stop in. What do you need? That type of thing. If my door is closed, I'm either not here or I closed it because I'm trying to get some stuff done. But I try to be intentional about having a little bit of door open time, which I think is important. I try to be really intentional about stopping in some different offices just to, meet people where they're at and see how they're doing. I would like to do a better job of getting to our practices a little bit more frequently, but it's much more challenging than I think I probably anticipated. So on an average day, I'm probably in, 4 to 5 hours of meetings of some kind, and spending the rest of the time trying to figure out how to keep things moving and getting things done. I'm a list person. I'm not a person who has to cross everything off the list in the one day. Like, there's a lot of those people. That's not me. But I try to just, as I'm sitting in a different meeting and think of something, I kind of have my my notes, my list of what's going on, because you sometimes think of things in the most random times, and really just try to keep myself organized in that way and lean on my people. I have a great staff. And that's probably the area I'm most proud of, is I'm starting to delegate a little bit better. I think when you start a job, you sort of innately feel like you have to do everything so that you can show people you can do it, or learn how people do things, or all of those kinds of things. And I've started to figure out, hey, maybe I don't have to be at that meeting, but I can send this person, or I can, just taking some load off of me in some different places. And my staff is really growing with me in that space, and I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, that's excellent. We all went through this period of our life where we thought, I want to be an athletic director. And really, for me, I'm not going to speak for you, but for me, I'm just picturing that photo cutting the net down at the championship or holding the trophy. And you do not contemplate how much time you're going to spend with human resources, and how many committees and meetings that athletics has to be present on.
Yeah.
So it's a good reminder for everyone out there in the world who aspires to this role that there's going to be an awful lot of that time spent on items that really are more universal than they are athletics.
Yeah, for sure. We have we joke around here a little bit about other duties as assigned. That phrase kind of lives in everybody's job description, of course. And with my admin team and our administrative GAs, we're sometimes out doing things that, just probably weren't on your job description, other duties as assigned today, and so you just find a way to step up and get stuff done. But certainly I go into my associate AD's offices sometimes and say, so you sure you want to do this? Here's what's going on today, and I try to loop them in as much as I'm able to, because they've got to, part of my job is to grow them if this is what they want to do, but they also need to understand then what, and certainly the phone calls or the kind of certain messages that you get that take your day from you're on one path and now you're taking a completely different turn because you got to address something that you weren't anticipating. Like, those are the kinds of things that people will never understand, which is why there isn't a typical day, because you never quite know what you're going to walk into or what you're going to have to deal with. And so I try to share that as much as I can, because I feel like that will help them in their space too. And it helps me to have somebody to talk to about it if I'm able to.
I am kind of laughing because I had my associate athletic director would often, her office was right next door to mine, and she'd come in and say, "Hey Jim, what do we want to do here?" And I could have said yes, I could have said no, but she will tell you it was usually a 4-minute answer, because I didn't want to just say yes or no. I wanted to explain the reason for those very same reasons of one day you'll make this decision, and I at least want you to know how I arrived where I arrived. I had the pleasure of meeting most of your staff and getting to watch soccer and eat pizza and hang out with them. And I'll agree that they are a great group of people. Mm-hmm. Now, what I noticed is you have some salty veterans and you have some other relatively younger. I don't know if that means they've only been in the position a short period of time or not, but just talk a little bit about maybe the opportunities and the challenges and how you go about working with a senior administrative staff that is pretty diverse, at least in terms of experience and age.
Yeah, I think it's been both of those things, a challenge and an opportunity, no doubt. It's opportunistic on the side of, when you have on a campus, our campus is not very big, a couple thousand students. When you have staff who have been here for a while, they've already established some key relationships, and hopefully those are good relationships, but they have a little bit more of a sense of maybe some of the historical things around. But that also brings kind of this, here's how we've always done it mentality that is really hard to navigate, especially when you have new staff. I've got 2 who are fresh this year, first year in athletics, and I've got an associate who he was here like 3 months before I was here, so he hasn't been here very long either in this space. And so you balance those kinds of things by engaging everyone. That's why I love the diversity of my table when we're having staff meetings, because we're going to come at it from a bunch of different areas, and really kind of to start it all. I just keep reminding people to put your ego at the door. Not that I think any of them have a big ego, but it's never personal in our space. We're just trying to figure out how to be better for SMSU. And if that means changing something that we've done for a really long time, it's not because it was a bad thing. It's because it's time to change, and that's okay. Change is just really hard, Jim. You know that. I mean, it's not just my admin team. I have a lot of coaches who have been here for a long time. And when you bring, everybody wants to put their own stamp on things. That is human nature. And I want to do some things my way. And really feel like finally kind of into year 3 now, people have been able to see me and see my heart, my visions, my goals. And I feel like we're kind of all getting on the right page or the same page. And doesn't mean that we don't disagree. Doesn't mean that we don't throw out some ideas and then kick them to the curb and say what we've been doing longer is the right thing. But it's really important for me to engage all of them in the conversation so that my young folks can hear maybe the why and the whatever from the folks who've been here for a long time, and then vice versa, and then figure out where we land, sometimes in the middle and sometimes we go a different direction. But we have a group that's willing to work together. That's part of it. I think I'm so fortunate to have a staff that has the same vision that I do, which is just to make this place as good as it can be. And if we kind of keep that as our overriding, goal, the meetings, it all shakes itself out when we kind of come back to our why and back to what are we doing this for. And so I appreciate all of them for different reasons. And I appreciate that my veterans have soaked in and really appreciated the young folks, and that the young folks have not come in and tried to just flip everything upside down. Like, we've had those conversations too, that you got to listen a lot. You get everybody, all of us, we all have 2 ears and one mouth for a reason. So let's listen to each other and really try to understand where we're coming from before we say, I don't really like that. What do you think about this? Or, man, that's awesome. I didn't even know we were doing it that way. Let's keep doing it that way. But it's really more about not trying to act too quickly so that we can hear each other out and make the best decisions.
Yeah, I love it. I would tell people all the time, you got to make us better. And while I really want you focused on your area, I want to get you to the point where you've got that figured out, and we can stretch you into other areas, like sending you to other committee meetings and things like that. So I love it. I had coaches in 20 years that I got 2 emails from. They just didn't do it. Mm-hmm. And then you hire some young coaches, and they don't email either. They just want to text me all the time. And I'm just the type of person that if this goes more than 2 texts, I'm just going to call you, because I don't want to tap anymore. So anyway, I appreciate that. As long as, a word I have heard so much over the last 4 or 5 years is like grace. Mm-hmm. It's like, we got to take the time to listen. It doesn't mean you're wrong. It doesn't mean you're right, but at least take the time to listen, because you never know where the next great idea is going to come from. For sure.
And we talked, so we all went to the event in Winona a few weeks ago, and on our way home, we climbed, we were all in one vehicle, all 7 of us, we called it the clown car, but we actually fit quite nicely. But we took some time to everybody shared some of their takeaways, and we just had really, really great dialogue about what we learned, what we heard, what we were doing, how we could use these different things. And it was really awesome to just kind of give everyone the platform to share what they took. And they all talked about listening and having that chance during the day to really hear from their colleagues and we're all trying to get better, and like stealing or imitating is the greatest form of flattery. So what are they doing? And all of these institutions are just like us. So what is it that they're doing that, maybe we're doing something similar, but we can tweak it, but you have to be able to talk it out, and you also have to be willing to fail. You have to be willing to try something and it not work. And that's okay. I think that's probably the biggest key right now with my young staff is just encouraging all of their ideas as best I can so that they can see how it goes. And, sometimes they'll come in and, like you mentioned about your associate, they'll ask, what do you think about this? Or what do you want to do about this? And right now my response is, well, what would you do? Like, what would you do? Come in, like, how do you want to do this? I want to support all of them, and I want to give them, the platforms to do their own work. And they're still, I'm still new enough that they want my approval, and they want to know that that it's the right thing to do, but I'm okay with trying things. And if it doesn't work, we won't do it again. Like, as long as, again, you have a reason and a why and a whatever, we'll get through it. And so it's part of it is just allowing people to be themselves. I was lucky enough to kind of be myself through this process. And I think it's kind of what helped me get to where I'm at. And I want that for them too.
Yeah. One thing I really want to tell you that stands out for me is that you have already developed among your staff this desire to keep learning and growing. I know to some extent that is a result of you working with other administrators who had the same attitude, but that really stood out to me, that was important for you.
Very important for me. We talk about it in our staff meetings all the time. And I talk about it with our student athletes. We're such a weird space in college athletics where unfortunately people think the grass is greener everywhere, and I just really believe that, and I take it probably from my own experience, was everything roses during my college career? No. But I learned a lot, and I learned what I didn't want to do sometimes, or how I didn't want to react. And I learned how I did want to react and what I liked. And I just feel like if you're not a daily learner, you're really just feeling yourself. And so that's kind of the message that we sort of take. And to be honest, Jim, we also just try to have a little bit of fun, like if you're enjoying what you're doing, it feels a lot less like work. And if you can, take 2 minutes to pop in and talk about the funny joke or talk about something, whatever, it's just, at the end of the day, I want our staff to be in a space where they can, again, truly just be themselves. And because if they're doing that, they're bringing their best selves to their ideas and to their things. And then hopefully they are learning and growing. And I made 100 mistakes. I still do. And they need to know that they can too. Like, that's not the end of the world. But like I said, we're going to try stuff. If it doesn't work, or if we forget something, or we miss something, or, this past weekend, we just hosted 7 events in about 30 hours. We had volleyball, a men's basketball tournament, football. It was crazy. And we had a different volleyball start time on Friday than we were used to. And our PA announcer got a little miscommunicated. And so we were 5 minutes from the start of volleyball and no PA announcer. And an already spread thin staff, because we're covering, we have 2 gyms on our campus, and they were both getting ready to play games. And one of our GAs was totally panicked. And, I just jumped in and did it, which was fine until he got there, and it was all worked out fine. But, then everyone's like, oh, are you mad? I was like, of course I'm not mad. It's just, it happens, if you get mad, what are you getting mad about? You just got to pivot, do it, get it done, keep it moving. We talk about the outside. It's almost like your wedding all the time. People would always tell me during my wedding, no one's ever going to know what went wrong, because nobody ever knew what it was supposed to be. So we try to just roll with the punches. If something bad happens, it happens. It's not going to happen again. Most people aren't even going to notice it. It's usually us that are the hardest on ourselves. So I'm thankful for my staff. I'm thankful they came. I'm thankful they shared that day. I think a lot of them really took a lot from that experience, and such a cool thing for us to be able to do together, because it gave us a platform to really grow together.
Okay. So when I think back to that event in Winona, part of what I remember is first of all, you were part of a terrific panel that talked about women in leadership in athletics. It was terrific. As I look at the evaluations, without fail, everyone points to that as one of the highlights. During that panel, you got somewhat emotional thinking about some of the mentors who had built you up over the years. So talk a little bit about some of those mentors and why that's important for you.
Well, my staff would tell you I probably get emotional way too often, that's also who I am. But I certainly would not have been anywhere in this business without a few really key people. I had the chance to do my master's degree at the University of Minnesota and work with a gentleman by the name of Mark Ryan, who is still an associate AD in the department there. And he gave me just so many opportunities. He's still one of my closest friends. Our paths are very, very connected. And he was the person who I think really made me feel like, okay, I want to be in administration. I don't even know if I want to coach. I started coaching, but sometimes because that was the opportunity that was there. But he was definitely the catalyst. But Larry Holstead, who I think I already mentioned, he was the AD at Winona during my collegiate career, and then also the first person that I went back to work for there. And he single-handedly got me into this business and kept me in this business. I mean, he is, I'm just so thankful for the opportunities that he gave me. And he took a chance on a really young person who somewhere along the line, he saw something in me that he thought was going to work, and he allowed me the flexibility to grow and to mess up. And so I think that's probably where that lesson for me comes from, is because I was them, right? I did that. I was doing those things and making those mistakes and having great ideas all the same. But Larry and then Eric Show, who's the current AD at Winona, he brought me back after a stint there. That when he became the AD there, he called, and my life was kind of in a different place at that point. And he said, I could really use somebody who's been here, who the coaches, can trust and believe in. I'm new to a little bit. And that was just a tremendous experience, because that was sort of what I consider like the new wave D2. A lot had changed since I had been there the first time. And Eric led totally different than Larry. So I had a chance to really learn from two very wonderful mentors in very different ways. And then Erin Lind at the conference office, one of my best friends, she still to this day is pushing me to get involved in different things and nominating me for things and trying to give me opportunities, because that's who she is. And this business is so small, that we laugh. It's like 3 degrees of separation and not 6, but I've just been really fortunate. That's just a handful, but those 4 people, really impactful on my life, and have all taught me in different ways, I hope, how to do that for other people, and how to make sure that I'm providing them the experiences and the opportunities if that's what they want, right? And I talk to our graduate assistants about, what is it that you want to do, and how can we make sure that we're getting things on your resume that are going to help you get there. And doesn't mean you won't have to do some other stuff, but like, what is it that we can do to get there? And I think it's a point of pride when someone leaves your campus and goes and works somewhere else and has, made it and wants to be in the business. So that's the approach that I take. I'm just thankful. My path has been weird and windy, but it's been full of really, really good people.
Yeah. Well, I admire your approach to it. And I have no doubt that someone's going to record a podcast in 10 years or 12 years and have somebody say, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Jen Flowers. And the business needs more people with that attitude of we got to keep growing and we got to keep giving back. All right. Well, I hate to say it, but we got time for one more question, and I'm going to have you put on your Marshall, Minnesota Chamber of Commerce hat.
Okay.
So if I'm making my first trip to Marshall, what's it like to live there, and what's the first thing I ought to do?
Oh man, Jim. So Marshall is a regional community in Southwest Minnesota. Shockingly, that's where the name of our institution comes from.
It would be so weird if it was in the Northeast.
It's, we're kind of in the middle of nowhere at times, but it's really perfect middle of nowhere in my opinion, because we're not. We're 45 minutes from a lot of different things. But there's a state park called Camden State Park about 3 or 4 miles outside of town that is probably one of the most beautiful places around. Really cool. Lots of hiking trails, camping, all those kinds of things. If you're into that, I think it's a big sell, I think, for people in Marshall. The bike trails in Marshall are phenomenal. It's very flat out here. So the thing about Marshall that can be tough, that I'm still not quite used to, is the wind. When it gets windy, it gets very windy, which makes some things pretty challenging. But, campus is probably the top draw, I would say. I mean, everybody, I think, has to come to campus, and I would want people to come see it and then eat locally. Marshall is full of local restaurants, which is really cool. We don't have a lot of chain stuff, and I think that allows people to support our local community in a lot of different ways. And there's a place called the Varsity Pub that has a sandwich called a panino. It's kind of like a wrap, kind of their version of a wrap. You have to come get a panino sometime.
Well, I live in Oklahoma, so guess what? Flat and windy. Yeah. I get that every day of the year.
You know all about it. It's a little colder here. I'm going to guess it's a little colder here when it gets cold.
Well, but I'm not sure we have a panino, so you got me.
Yeah, there you go.
Food is the key. Well, Jen, our time went by really quickly, and I just met you recently and was so enthralled with you that I had to take the next step and get you on the podcast. So thank you so much for your time and what you do for the profession.
I sincerely appreciate that and appreciate you. I appreciate what you're doing to make us better and keep us learning.